The snow fell thick and silent over Tulsa on Christmas Eve, blanketing the city in white, while families gathered around warm fires and glittering trees. But for 9-year-old Sarah, standing alone on a frozen sidewalk with nothing but a thin sweater and broken heart, this was the night everything would change, though not in any way she could have imagined. Christmas had always been Sarah Mitchell's least favorite holiday. While other children counted down the days with advent calendars and wrote letters to Santa filled with impossible wishes, Sarah had learned early that the magic everyone talked about wasn't meant for girls like her. Orphaned at 4 when a car accident took both her parents, she had spent the last 5 years living with her Aunt Carol and Uncle Robert in their modest house on the outskirts of Tulsa, Oklahoma. They had taken her in because the state required family placement first, not because they wanted her. Sarah knew this. She had always known this. If this story touches your heart, please leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us bring more stories of hope to people who need them most. The house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon candles as Sarah sat quietly in the corner of the living room, watching her cousins tear through their mountain of presents with greedy hands. Tyler, 12, had already unwrapped a new gaming console, 3 video games, and a drone. His sister Madison, 14, was squealing over designer clothes and the latest smartphone. The tree sparkled with lights and ornaments, and Christmas carols played softly from the speaker system. It was, by all appearances, a perfect holiday scene, except Sarah had nothing. She had checked under the tree 3 times, moving boxes carefully, looking for anything with her name on it. There was nothing, not a single gift, not even a card. She sat in her corner wearing the nicest clothes she owned, a simple blue dress that was getting too short and a cardigan with a small hole in the elbow, and tried to make herself invisible. Aunt Carol swept through the room in her red holiday dress, a glass of wine in her hand that was far from her first of the evening. She paused to kiss Tyler on the head, to compliment Madison on her new outfit, to laugh with Uncle Robert about some joke Sarah couldn't hear. Her eyes passed over Sarah as if she were a piece of furniture. Less than furniture, actually. At least the furniture belonged here. "Mom, can I set up my PlayStation in the basement?" Tyler asked. "Of course, sweetheart. Robert, help him carry everything down." The family bustled around, everyone with somewhere to be, something to do, someone who cared about them. Sarah remained in her corner, her hands folded in her lap, her brown eyes fixed on the carpet. She had taught herself not to cry years ago. Crying only made things worse. The doorbell rang, and suddenly the house was full of more relatives. Aunt Carol's sister and her family, Uncle Robert's parents, cousins Sarah had met maybe twice in her life. They all hugged and kissed and exchanged gifts, filling the house with noise and warmth that somehow made Sarah feel even colder. "Sarah, make yourself useful," Aunt Carol said sharply, thrusting a tray of appetizers into her hands. "Pass these around to our guests." Sarah did as she was told, weaving through the crowd of adults who looked through her like glass, offering cheese and crackers to people who took without thanking, without even acknowledging the small girl holding the tray. She was a ghost in her own home. No, not her home. She had never been allowed to forget that this wasn't her home. Dinner was served at the long table in the dining room, extended with extra leaves to accommodate everyone. Sarah was placed at the very end, squeezed between the wall and her grandmother's empty chair. No one talked to her. No one asked about school or friends or what she wanted for Christmas. The conversations flowed around her like a river around a stone. "So Tyler's made the honor roll again?" Uncle Robert announced proudly. "Madison got accepted to that exclusive summer program," Aunt Carol added. Story after story about children who mattered, who belonged, who were loved. Sarah ate her turkey in silence and tried to remember what her mother's voice had sounded like. After 5 years, the memory was fading, and that scared her more than anything. After dinner, the adults gathered in the living room for coffee and more wine, while the children scattered to play with their new toys. Sarah started clearing plates, carrying them to the kitchen because that was what was expected of her. She was loading the dishwasher when she heard her name from the other room. Not spoken to her, but about her. Cost of raising that child is astronomical. Food, clothes, school supplies. Carol, it's Christmas. Can we not do this tonight? When else, Robert? She's not even grateful. Did you see her face during presents? Like she expected something. Sarah's hands froze over a dirty plate. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The voices in the living room grew louder as more wine was poured and inhibitions faded. Sarah remained frozen in the kitchen doorway, hidden from view, but able to hear every word that cut into her like shards of broken glass. "I never wanted her here in the first place," Aunt Carol was saying, her words slightly slurred. "My sister's mistake shouldn't be my burden to carry. Jennifer always was irresponsible, getting pregnant so young, marrying that man." "Carol, the child might hear you," someone warned. "Let her hear. Maybe it's time she understood the truth. We've sacrificed everything for her, and what do we get in return? A sullen, ungrateful little girl who mopes around the house like we ruined her life. We gave her a roof over her head. We gave her food and clothes and a corner to sleep in," Sarah whispered to herself, thinking of the tiny space in the basement that served as her bedroom, with its single mattress on the floor and the boxes of storage that surrounded it like prison walls. She should have stayed hidden. She should have kept quiet and let the storm pass like she always did. But something about tonight, the missing presence, the pointed exclusion, hearing her dead mother called a mistake, cracked something open inside her that had been sealed shut for 5 years. Sarah stepped into the living room. Every head turned toward her, and the conversation stopped abruptly. Aunt Carol's face flushed red, whether from wine or embarrassment or anger, Sarah couldn't tell. "I'm not ungrateful," Sarah said, her voice small but steady. "I always say thank you. I do my chores. I get good grades. I never ask for anything." Her eyes were burning, but she refused to let the tears fall. "I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask for my parents to die. I'm sorry I'm such a burden." The silence that followed was suffocating. Uncle Robert looked at his feet. The other relatives examined their coffee cups with sudden fascination. Only Aunt Carol met Sarah's gaze, and what Sarah saw there made her blood run cold. There was no guilt in those eyes, no shame, only fury at being confronted by a 9-year-old in front of her family. Carol stood up slowly, her wineglass still clutched in her hand. "How dare you?" she said, her voice low and dangerous. "How dare you speak to me like that in my own house, after everything we've done for you?" "Carol!" Uncle Robert started. "No!" Carol slammed her glass down on the coffee table, wine splashing onto the wood. "I've had enough. 5 years of this. 5 years of pretending everything is fine while this child drains our bank account and gives nothing back. Not even basic respect." Sarah took a step backward, suddenly aware of how badly she had miscalculated. She had expected denial, maybe even an awkward apology. She had not expected this. "I'm sorry," Sarah said quickly. "I didn't mean—" "You're sorry? You're sorry?" Carol laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to know what sorry looks like? Sorry is taking in your dead sister's brat because the state guilted you into it. Sorry is watching your own children go without so you can feed another mouth. Sorry is knowing that no matter what you do, you'll never be free of this mistake." "That's enough, Carol." This from Robert's mother, the only person in the room who seemed genuinely disturbed by what was happening. But Carol was past the point of stopping. Years of resentment, amplified by alcohol and the stress of the holidays, came pouring out in a toxic flood. She advanced on Sarah, her finger pointing like a weapon. "You know what? I'm done. I'm done pretending. You were never part of this family, Sarah. You were a charity case, an obligation, a burden we never asked for. And I'm tired of carrying it." She grabbed Sarah's arm and started pulling her toward the front door. Sarah stumbled, too shocked to resist, too small to fight back even if she wanted to. "Carol, what are you doing?" Uncle Robert stood up, his face pale. "It's below zero outside. She can find somewhere else to spend Christmas, a shelter. The streets, I don't care anymore." Carol yanked open the front door, and a blast of frigid air swept into the house along with swirling snowflakes. "Get out! Please," Sarah whispered, finally finding her voice. "Please, Aunt Carol, I'm sorry. I'll be good. I'll do better. Please don't. I said get out." Carol shoved Sarah through the doorway. The 9-year-old stumbled down the porch steps, catching herself before she fell into the snow. She turned back, looking at the open door, at the warm light spilling out, at the faces of her relatives watching from behind her aunt. Not one of them moved to help her, not one of them spoke up. Carol slammed the door shut, and Sarah was alone. The cold hit her like a physical blow. Sarah stood on the frozen sidewalk in her thin blue dress and worn cardigan, the snow already settling in her brown hair. The temperature was well below zero, and she had no coat, no gloves, no hat. She had nothing. For a long moment she couldn't move. She stared at the closed door, at the Christmas lights twinkling along the roofline, at the warm glow of windows where a family celebrated without her. Part of her expected the door to open again, for someone to come rushing out with apologies and a warm blanket, but the door stayed closed. The seconds stretched into minutes, and no one came. Sarah started walking. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stand there and freeze to death on her aunt's lawn. Her feet, clad only in thin dress shoes, were already going numb as she trudged through the accumulating snow. The streets were empty. Everyone was inside with their families, their presents, their love. The houses she passed were full of light and life, each one a reminder of what she didn't have. The wind picked up, cutting through her cardigan like it wasn't there. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, teeth chattering so hard she couldn't have spoken, even if there was anyone to speak to. Her fingers were turning blue. Her ears burned with cold. Every breath was a knife in her lungs. She walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, past the residential streets, past the dark storefronts of downtown, past churches whose doors were locked despite the season. The snow fell harder, erasing her footprints behind her, as if the world itself was trying to forget she existed. Sarah was 9 years old, and she was going to die on Christmas Eve. She understood this with a strange calm. She was too cold now to feel much of anything. Fear, sadness, anger. Just a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that made her want to lie down in the snow and sleep forever. Maybe she would see her mom and dad again. Maybe dying wouldn't be so bad. She stumbled into an alley, seeking shelter from the wind, and collapsed against a dumpster. Her body had stopped shivering, which some distant part of her mind recognized as a very bad sign. Her eyes were closing. The snow was falling. Everything was getting quiet and soft, and then she heard it. Music, laughter, the rumble of engines. Sarah forced her eyes open. At the end of the alley, she could see lights. Warm, golden lights spilling from a building across the street, and parked in front of it, row after row of motorcycles, their chrome glinting beneath a layer of fresh snow. She didn't think. She couldn't think anymore. She just moved toward the light, toward the warmth, toward the only hope she had left. Her legs gave out halfway across the street, and she fell to her knees in the snow. But she kept crawling inch by inch until she reached the door of the bar and pressed her frozen hand against the wood. Inside, 200 Hell's Angels were celebrating Christmas together, men and women who had no families to go home to, who had found their belonging in leather and chrome and Brotherhood. They were drinking and laughing and exchanging gifts, creating their own version of holiday magic. Marcus Reaper Stone, president of the Tulsa chapter, was telling a story about a Christmas ride gone wrong when the front door creaked open and a small figure collapsed onto the floor of the bar. The music stopped. The laughter died. Every eye in the place turned toward the door, toward the tiny girl in the snow-covered dress, her lips blue and her skin pale as death. Marcus was on his feet before anyone else could move. "Someone call 911!" he shouted, rushing toward her. "Get blankets, now!" But as he lifted the frozen child in his arms, as her eyes fluttered open and met his, something shifted in Marcus Stone's hardened heart. She was 9 years old, the same age his daughter Emily had been when a drunk driver took her away 5 years ago. And in that moment, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. The warmth hit Sarah like a wave, so intense after the killing cold that it almost hurt. She was vaguely aware of being carried, of rough hands that were somehow gentle, of voices shouting orders she couldn't understand. Someone wrapped something heavy and warm around her. A leather jacket that smelled like motor oil and cigarettes, and something else she couldn't name. Safety, maybe. If safety had a smell, this would be it. "She's hypothermic," a woman's voice said. "We need to get her core temperature up slowly. Someone get warm water, not hot, warm. And more blankets." Sarah tried to open her eyes, but her lids were so heavy she could feel herself being lowered onto something soft, a couch maybe, and then more weight was piled on top of her. Blankets, jackets, the warmth of bodies pressing close. "Hey, sweetheart, can you hear me?" The voice was deep and rough, but kind. Sarah forced her eyes open a crack and saw a bearded face hovering above her, grey hair, blue eyes filled with something that looked like pain. "That's it. Stay with me. What's your name?" Sarah, she managed through chattering teeth. "Sarah. That's a beautiful name. I'm Marcus. You're safe now, Sarah. You're going to be okay." Safe. The word felt foreign, like something from a language she had once known but forgotten. Sarah's eyes drifted closed again, but this time it wasn't the sleep of death pulling her down. It was exhaustion, pure and simple, and beneath all the blankets and jackets and warmth, her body was finally allowing itself to rest. Marcus Stone sat back on his heels, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. 5 years, to be exact. 5 years since the night he got the call that Emily was gone, hit by a drunk driver while walking home from her friend's house. She had been 9 years old, the same age as this frozen angel who had literally collapsed at his feet on Christmas Eve. He didn't believe in God, hadn't since the night he buried his daughter. But looking at Sarah's pale face, at the way the color was slowly returning to her cheeks, Marcus couldn't help but wonder if something bigger than coincidence had brought her to his door tonight. Reaper. Tank, his vice president, approached with a cup of warm water. "She say anything about where she came from, where her family is?" Not yet. She could barely talk. Marcus took the water and held it to Sarah's lips, helping her take small sips. "But look at her clothes. That dress isn't meant for winter, and those shoes, they're soaked through. Someone put her out in this weather without a coat." Tank's expression darkened. On Christmas Eve. On Christmas Eve. Around them, the 200 members of the Tulsa chapter had formed a protective circle, their Christmas celebration forgotten. These were men and women whose society had written off. Ex-cons, addicts in recovery, veterans who couldn't adjust to civilian life, outcasts and misfits who had found family in the club when their blood relatives had abandoned them. Every single one of them knew what it felt like to be thrown away. And every single one of them was looking at Sarah with a mixture of fury and fierce protectiveness. "Someone get me a phone," Marcus said. "I want to know who did this to her." But first, they needed to make sure she would survive the night. Dr. Maria Santos, a former military medic who had been riding with the club for 15 years, took charge of Sarah's care. She checked her vital signs, monitored her temperature, and gradually introduced warmth back into her frozen body. It took nearly an hour before Sarah was stable enough to sit up and drink hot chocolate on her own. "She's going to be okay," Maria announced to the room. "Another 20 minutes out there and we'd be telling a different story. But she's tough, this one." A cheer went up from the assembled bikers, followed by applause. Sarah looked around at all the leather-clad strangers clapping for her and felt something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Like she mattered, like people actually cared whether she lived or died. Marcus pulled up a chair beside the couch where Sarah sat bundled in blankets. "Sarah, I need to ask you some questions." "Ask." "Can you tell me what happened tonight? Why were you outside in the snow with no coat?" Sarah's eyes dropped to her hot chocolate. The warmth of the mug felt good against her still cold fingers. "My aunt kicked me out," she said quietly, "during Christmas dinner. She said I was never part of the family. She said I was a burden." A murmur of anger rippled through the room. Someone cursed loudly. Someone else had to be physically restrained by his brothers. "Where are your parents?" Marcus asked gently. "Dead. They died when I was 4. Car accident. I've been living with my Aunt Carol and Uncle Robert ever since." Sarah finally looked up, and Marcus saw something in her brown eyes that shattered him. Not just pain or fear, but resignation. The look of a child who had learned not to expect anything good from the world. "She's never wanted me. I've always known that, but I didn't think she would." Sarah's voice broke. "It's Christmas. I didn't think she would throw me away on Christmas." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. He had done a lot of things in his 52 years that he wasn't proud of. He had broken bones and broken laws and broken hearts, but he had never, ever hurt a child. The very thought of it made him sick. And now, here was this little girl, this 9-year-old orphan, telling him that her own family had thrown her into the snow to die on Christmas Eve. "What's your aunt's address?" Marcus asked, his voice carefully controlled. Sarah told him. Marcus recognized the neighborhood, middle class, suburban, the kind of place where people put up inflatable Santas and competed to have the most lights. The kind of place where something like this shouldn't happen. But Marcus knew better than anyone that monsters didn't always look like monsters. Sometimes they looked like ordinary people, living in ordinary houses, doing monstrous things behind closed doors. The vote was unanimous. Marcus had called an emergency church meeting right there in the bar, with Sarah safely wrapped in blankets in a back room where she couldn't hear what was being discussed. 200 Hell's Angels stood in a circle, their faces grim in the dim light. "You all saw her," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the silent room. 9 years old, thrown out like garbage on the coldest night of the year, left to die. He paused, letting the words sink in. "I'm proposing that we take her under the club's protection. Full protection. Anyone who wants to hurt her has to go through all of us." "What about the law?" someone asked. "They'll say we kidnapped her." "We didn't kidnap anyone. She came to us. And I'll be damned if I'm going to hand her back to people who tried to kill her." Marcus looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. "We've all been thrown away by someone. Every person in this room knows what it feels like to be told you're not good enough, not wanted, not family. That little girl is one of us now. She just doesn't know it yet." Tank stepped forward. "I'm with Reaper. All in favor?" 200 hands went up. Not a single person abstained. Marcus nodded slowly, feeling something unlock in his chest that had been sealed shut since Emily's funeral. "Then it's decided. From this moment on, Sarah is under the protection of the Tulsa chapter. She's family. Anyone who touches her answers to all of us." The room erupted in cheers and applause. But Marcus was already moving toward the back room, toward the little girl who had no idea her life was about to change forever. Sarah looked up when he entered, her eyes wide and uncertain. She had changed into dry clothes someone had found, a t-shirt that hung to her knees and sweatpants rolled up several times at the ankles. She looked impossibly small and fragile, like a baby bird that had fallen from its nest. "Sarah, we need to talk about what happens next," Marcus said, pulling up a chair to sit across from her. "I know you're scared, and I know you don't know us. But I want you to understand something." He leaned forward, his blue eyes intense but kind. "What your aunt did was wrong. It was cruel and it was criminal. No child deserves to be treated like that, especially not on Christmas." Sarah nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes that she tried hard to blink away. "My club, my family. We've decided something tonight. We've decided that you're one of us now. That means you're protected. It means no one can hurt you without going through 200 people who will fight for you. It means you have a family, Sarah. A real family. If you want it." Sarah stared at him, not understanding. "But you don't even know me." "I know enough. I know you're brave. You survived tonight when most grown men would have given up. I know you're strong. You've been living with people who didn't love you for 5 years, and you're still here, still fighting. And I know you deserve better than what you've been given." Marcus reached out and gently took her small hand in his large, calloused one. "I had a daughter once. She was your age when I lost her. I couldn't save her. But maybe I can help save you." The tears Sarah had been fighting finally broke free, streaming down her cheeks. I don't have anyone," she whispered. "I've never had anyone." "You have us now," Marcus said firmly. "All 200 of us. We're not perfect, Sarah. We're rough around the edges, and society doesn't think much of us. But we take care of our own, and you're our own now, if you want to be." Sarah looked at this big, bearded man who was offering her something she had never had: belonging. Outside, she could hear the rumble of voices, the clink of glasses, the sound of people celebrating. Her family had thrown her away like trash. These strangers had pulled her from the snow and wrapped her in warmth and protection. "I want to be," Sarah said, her voice small but certain. "I want to be part of your family." Marcus smiled, a real smile, the first one in 5 years that reached his eyes. "Then welcome home, sweetheart, welcome home." That night, the Tulsa chapter of the Hells Angels threw Sarah the best Christmas party she had ever experienced. They gave her presents bought from the gas station across the street, candy bars and stuffed animals and a warm hoodie with the club's logo that hung past her knees. They sang Christmas carols badly and told her stories about their adventures on the road. They made her laugh for the first time in months, maybe years. And when Sarah finally fell asleep on the couch, surrounded by 200 guardian angels in leather, she dreamed of motorcycles and open roads and a family that had chosen her. 4 days after Christmas, a silver SUV pulled up outside the Hells Angels clubhouse. Carol and Robert Mitchell stepped out, their faces set in expressions of concerned parental worry that wouldn't have fooled anyone who knew the truth. They had spent the past 4 days fielding questions from neighbors and relatives about where Sarah had gone on Christmas Eve. The story they'd told, that Sarah had run away after a small disagreement, was starting to fall apart as more people asked more questions. They needed Sarah back. Not because they wanted her, but because they needed to control the narrative. What they found when they approached the clubhouse stopped them dead in their tracks. 200 motorcycles were parked in formation around the building. 200 bikers stood in a silent wall between the Mitchells and the front door. And in the center of that wall stood Marcus Reaper Stone, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression as cold as the December wind. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked, though his tone made clear he had no intention of helping. Carol's composure cracked slightly, but she pushed forward with practiced confidence. "We're here for our niece, Sarah Mitchell. We know she's here. We've come to take her home." Home. Marcus let the word hang in the air like an accusation. "You mean the home you threw her out of on Christmas Eve? The home where she was so unloved she didn't even get a single present? That home?" Carol's face flushed red. "There was a misunderstanding. I had too much to drink and said some things I didn't mean. It's a family matter, and we're here to resolve it." A family matter. Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. "Let me tell you what your family matter looked like from where we stood. A 9-year-old girl, alone in a blizzard, in a thin dress with no coat. Body temperature so low she was 20 minutes from dying. Collapsed at our door because she had nowhere else to go, because her own family, her own blood, threw her away like garbage." The other bikers shifted, their expressions hard and hostile. Carol and Robert had clearly not anticipated this level of resistance. "Look," Robert said, trying to sound reasonable, "we appreciate you helping her, really we do. But she's our responsibility. The state placed her with us. If we don't bring her back, there will be legal consequences." "For who?" Marcus asked. "For us or for you? Because I'm pretty sure abandoning a child to freeze to death is a felony. I'm pretty sure Child Protective Services would be very interested in hearing Sarah's side of the story, about the years of neglect, about being made to feel like a burden in her own home, about being called a mistake." Carol went pale. "She's lying. Children lie. She's always been difficult." "She's not lying. The voice came from behind Marcus, and everyone turned to see Sarah emerging from the clubhouse. She was wearing the hoodie the club had given her, her brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, her chin raised with a courage that hadn't been there 4 days ago. "Everything you did to me, everything you said, it happened. And I'm not going back with you, ever." Carol's mask of concern finally dropped, revealing the ugly resentment beneath. "You ungrateful little—" "Choose your next words very carefully," Marcus interrupted, stepping forward so he towered over her. "Because there are 200 people here who would love nothing more than an excuse to show you what happens to people who hurt children." Carol snapped her mouth shut, visibly trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. Sarah walked forward until she was standing beside Marcus, reaching up to take his hand. The gesture was small but powerful, a child choosing her protector, her family, her home. "You never wanted me," Sarah said to her aunt and uncle, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "You made that clear every single day for 5 years. Well, now you don't have to pretend anymore. I found people who actually want me. People who saved my life and gave me a real Christmas and made me feel like I belong." She squeezed Marcus's hand tightly. "This is my family now." Carol sputtered, looking around for support and finding none. Even Robert wouldn't meet her eyes. "You can't just— This isn't legal," Carol finally managed. "Actually, it is." A woman stepped forward from the crowd of bikers, Dr. Maria Santos, who had spent the past 4 days making some very important phone calls. "I've been in contact with Child Protective Services. They're opening an investigation into Sarah's living conditions and the events of Christmas Eve. Based on her testimony and medical evidence of the hypothermia she suffered, they've agreed to emergency temporary placement with a foster family that has been thoroughly vetted and approved." "What foster family?" Robert demanded. Maria smiled. "Mine. I've been a licensed foster parent for 12 years. Sarah will be staying with me until the investigation is complete and permanent arrangements can be made." She looked at Marcus with a knowing expression. Of course, she'll have plenty of support from her extended family. The 200 bikers behind her nodded in unison. Carol's face contorted with rage, but there was nothing she could do. CPS was involved now. The story would come out. Her reputation, the thing she had always cared about more than the orphaned child in her care, was about to be destroyed by the truth she had tried so hard to hide. "This isn't over," Carol hissed. "Yes, it is," Sarah said quietly. "It's over, and I won, because I found people who love me, and you never will." Carol and Robert retreated to their SUV, defeated. As they drove away, the bikers erupted in cheers, lifting Sarah onto their shoulders like she had just won a championship. She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in 5 years, surrounded by 200 people who had chosen to be her family. That night, Marcus sat on the porch of Maria's house, watching Sarah through the window as she helped decorate the New Year's tree Maria had put up. She was smiling, chattering happily about nothing and everything, looking like a different child than the frozen ghost who had collapsed in his bar on Christmas Eve. Tank dropped into the chair beside him. "You did good, brother." "We all did," Marcus said. "She's going to be okay." "Yeah, she is." Tank was quiet for a moment. "You think Emily sent her to us? On Christmas Eve, of all nights?" Marcus had wondered the same thing 100 times over the past 4 days. He still didn't believe in God, but he was starting to believe in something. Call it fate, call it karma, call it the universe looking out for broken people and bringing them together when they needed each other most. "I don't know," Marcus finally said, "but I'm grateful either way. That little girl saved me just as much as I saved her." Inside, Sarah looked up from the ornament she was hanging and saw Marcus watching through the window. She smiled and waved, then pressed her hand to her heart, the same gesture he had used when he first found her, the silent promise that said, "I see you, I've got you, you're not alone." Marcus pressed his hand to his own heart in response. Family isn't blood. Family is choice. Family is the people who show up when everyone else walks away. And on that cold Christmas Eve in Tulsa, 200 unlikely angels had shown up for a little girl who had lost everything and given her something no one could ever take away, a place to belong.